Hey, my name is Tyler Hayes. I'm 29 years old and I work as an electrician in a small town on the edge of a lake in northern Wisconsin. Most days I crawl through crawl spaces, replace old panels in damp basements, and climb into attics that feel like ovens in the summer. The work is hard on the body, but I like it. There's something honest about fixing things people depend on. When I leave a house, the lights stay on. That's enough for me. I don't have a fancy life. I drive an old pickup with too many miles on it, live in a small rental above a garage, and spend most evenings with a beer on the porch watching the lake change colors. I'm not lonely exactly. I just got used to my own company a long time ago. The one constant in my life for the last 17 years has been Stella Bennett. We've been best friends since we were 12. She saw me through the worst version of myself. Braces, bad haircuts, the year I thought cargo shorts were a personality. I was there when she cried over her first breakup, when her grandpa got sick, when she moved out of her parents' house, and when she finally left Brandon. Brandon. Even now, saying his name in my head feels like biting into something sour. He wasn't the kind of guy you could hate out loud. Polite, successful, always knew what to say. But he had a way of making Stella doubt herself. If she got upset, he told her she was too sensitive. If she got quiet, he said she was punishing him. After they broke up, she didn't talk about it much. But I knew it hurt her deeper than she let on. 3 days before her dad's 60th birthday, Stella showed up at my door without warning. She had 2 boxes of takeout Chinese and 2 cans of soda in her hands. The look on her face told me I wasn't allowed to say no to whatever came next. I opened the door and she walked straight in, setting the food on my tiny kitchen table like she owned the place. "Tyler," she said, not even waiting for me to sit down, "I need you to be my boyfriend this weekend." I nearly choked on the water I was drinking. I stared at her, trying to process the words. "Can you repeat that in a less terrifying way?" Stella dropped onto my couch, pulling one of the takeout boxes toward herself. She tried to act casual, but I saw the way her fingers tightened around the chopsticks. "It's my dad's 60th birthday weekend at the lake house. The whole family's coming. My parents, Tyler, aunts, uncles, cousins. It was supposed to be a normal family thing. Cake, old photos, dad pretending he doesn't like us singing happy birthday when we all know he loves it." I sat down across from her, still not hearing the part where I need to be your boyfriend. She took a deep breath, her eyes darkening. "Brandon's going to be there." The room went quiet. She continued quickly, like ripping off a bandage. "Tyler invited him. They still do some small investment projects together. Even after we broke up, Brandon still gets invited to family stuff like nothing happened. I can't do a whole weekend of everyone looking at me with pity. I don't want Aunt Carol asking if I'm eating okay. I don't want Mom watching me like I'm about to break. And I really don't want Brandon standing there, all calm and reasonable, waiting for me to admit I made a mistake leaving him." I understood then. She didn't need a fake boyfriend to show off. She needed a shield. Someone to stand between her and the past. Someone who made it impossible for Brandon to get too close. Someone who made her family stop treating her like a wound that hadn't healed. I asked the obvious question, even though I already knew my answer. "Why me?" Stella looked at me, no teasing this time. "Because you're the only person I can spend an entire weekend with without having to explain every little feeling. Because my family already knows you. Because Dad likes you. And because you make me feel safe." That last part hit me harder than I expected. I'm just an electrician. I fix broken wires and blown fuses. But the way Stella looked at me in that moment, it felt like she thought I could keep her from falling apart. I gave her a small smile, trying to hide the strange feeling in my chest. "So the plan is I show up, hold your hand, call your dad, sir, and try not to blow up dinner?" Stella let out a relieved breath, realizing I was saying yes. She explained the details quickly. One weekend. Act natural enough that no one asks too many questions. After Sunday, everything goes back to normal. I nodded. One weekend. But when I said it, neither of us looked at each other for too long. Because between Stella and me, there had always been moments like this. Moments where the joke stopped being funny, where a look lasted a second too long, where we stood a little closer than friends should, and then one of us would laugh, change the subject, and we'd stay safe again. I told myself this weekend would be the same. I was wrong. Friday afternoon, we drove up to the lake house through heavy snow. The roads were slippery, wind howling against the truck windows. When we arrived, the main house was already full of family, so Stella's mom arranged for us to stay at a small guest house nearby. The woman at the front desk smiled brightly as she checked the computer. We only have one room left, the honeymoon suite. I froze, one glove halfway off. Stella immediately slipped her arm through mine and squeezed, a clear warning. She turned to the woman with a perfectly calm smile. Perfect, we'll take it. I leaned toward her and whispered, Stella. She kept smiling, but her eyes flicked to me quickly. Don't ruin this. I handed over my card. When we opened the door to the room, I knew the universe had a cruel sense of humor. There was a heart-shaped wreath on the door. Inside, a stone fireplace, huge windows overlooking the frozen lake, and one very large bed with thick blankets. No couch, no second bed. Just one very obvious honeymoon bed. I stood in the doorway, staring at it. This room is plotting against us. Stella pulled off her beanie, letting her hair fall around her face. She tried not to laugh. Relax, Tyler. We've survived worse than one bed. I looked at her. Name one. Stella answered instantly, dead serious. Your 7th grade band concert. I pretended to be offended. I had a trumpet and a dream. You had 3 notes and way too much confidence. We laughed, but the laughter died quickly when we both looked back at the bed. Stella turned away, unpacking her bag. We'll get through dinner, act normal, convince everyone I'm fine, and tomorrow everything will calm down. I set my bag down, watching her. Tomorrow's carrying a lot of pressure. Stella smiled faintly. Tomorrow has survived me before. I watched her fold a sweater, moving a little too fast, the way she always did when she didn't want anyone to see she was nervous. Stella, I said quietly. She looked up. I spoke with more certainty than I felt. We've got this. She held my gaze for a few seconds, her eyes softened, just a little. Yeah, she whispered, we've survived worse. Then she tossed my jacket at my chest. Come on, fake boyfriend. If we're late, Dad will ask why, and I don't want to start this weekend explaining the honeymoon suite. I caught the jacket and forced a smile. But behind us, the room with its one bed, warm fireplace, and snow falling outside the window waited quietly, like it already knew we were lying. The main lake house was loud the second we walked in. Wet boots lined the hallway, coats hung everywhere, and someone in the kitchen was already burning the first batch of garlic bread. Voices overlapped, kids running, adults arguing over who was supposed to bring the extra chairs. It smelled like home-cooked chaos and wood smoke from the big fireplace. Stella slipped her hand into mine as we stepped through the door. The gesture was supposed to be part of the act, but her fingers were cold. I squeezed them once, trying to tell her without words that I was right there with her. Her mom, Linda, came out of the kitchen with a dish towel over her shoulder. Tyler, thank God you made it. Tell me Stella didn't drive too fast in that snow. I shrugged off my coat and smiled. I could tell you, but she wouldn't listen anyway. Stella leaned into my side, playing the part perfectly. See, he gets me. Linda laughed and pulled us both into quick hugs. Then she looked at us standing close together and raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. Not yet. We moved into the living room where Stella's dad, Richard, was sitting near the fire. He turned 60 today, silver hair, flannel shirt, the kind of man who didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. When he saw me, he stood up and clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. Tyler, the only electrician I trust not to burn my house down. I grinned. Happy birthday, sir. I'll take that as high praise. His eyes moved from me to Stella, who was still standing close enough that our arms brushed. One of his eyebrows lifted slightly. So, you two finally figured it out? Stella immediately kissed his cheek, talking fast. Happy birthday, Dad. Don't start interrogating us at the door. Richard chuckled, low and warm. I'm just saying, I have eyes. I felt Stella tense beside me. I slid my arm around her waist without thinking. It was supposed to be fake. It didn't feel fake. Then I saw Brandon. He was standing near the kitchen counter talking to Tyler, Stella's older brother. Crisp gray sweater, expensive watch, that calm, reasonable smile he always wore. When his eyes landed on Stella's hand and mine, his expression didn't change much. But I caught the brief pause. the way his jaw tightened for half a second. Dinner was loud and warm and overwhelming in the best and worst ways. The long wooden table was packed with family, plates of roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, and too many casseroles. I sat next to Stella, my knee brushing hers under the table. Everything we did felt dangerously natural. When Aunt Carol asked how long we'd been together, Stella answered smoothly, leaning her head against my shoulder. Depends who you ask. Aunt Carol has been planning our wedding since we were 17. Aunt Carol threw her hands up in delight. I only said you two had chemistry. Tyler jumped in, grinning. You said they looked like a Christmas card. They do, Aunt Carol insisted. The whole table laughed. Under the table, Stella's hand found mine and held on. I didn't let go. I passed her the sweet potato casserole because I knew she loved it. She stole a piece of chicken from my plate without asking, like she'd done it 1,000 times before. When Aunt Carol gently asked Stella if she was eating okay these days, I felt Stella stiffen. Before she had to answer, I smiled at her aunt and said casually, "She's been too busy helping me pick out curtains." My place was starting to look like a construction site. Stella turned to me, eyes bright with relief and something warmer. You needed the help. You almost bought shower curtains for the living room. They were nice fabric, I said seriously. They had metal rings for the rod. The table erupted in laughter again. Stella's shoulders relaxed. Under the table, she squeezed my hand tighter. Across from us, Brandon smiled politely, but his eyes were cold. He watched every small thing. How I remembered what Stella liked, how she leaned into me, how natural it all looked. Later in the evening, after cake and singing and more stories, people started drifting off. Stella and I ended up on the back porch for some air. Snow had started falling again, soft and quiet. The lake was a dark sheet beyond the trees. She stood close, arms wrapped around herself. You were really good tonight, she said softly. So were you. We were quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again, almost too quietly. It didn't feel like acting. Not all of it. I looked at her. Snowflakes caught in her hair. No, I admitted. It didn't. Stella turned to face me. The porch light painted her face in soft gold. For a second, neither of us moved. The air between us felt heavy, charged with everything we'd been ignoring for years. She opened her mouth to say something, but the back door opened. Tyler stuck his head out. You two lovebirds coming back inside? Dad wants another round of cake. The moment broke. Stella gave a small laugh and stepped back. Coming, she called. As we walked back in, her hand brushed mine again. This time I didn't know if it was for the family's benefit. And the scariest part? I wasn't sure I wanted to know. After dinner, while everyone sang happy birthday and Richard pretended to hate it, I watched Stella standing beside her dad. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired. When Richard pulled her into a hug and whispered something only she could hear, her shoulders tensed for just a moment. I knew that look. She was holding it together. Later that night, back in the honeymoon suite, the silence felt heavier than before. Stella changed in the bathroom and came out in an oversized t-shirt and sleep shorts. I tried not to stare. I failed. She climbed into bed, leaving plenty of space between us. I turned off the lights and lay on my side, staring at the dark ceiling. A few minutes passed. Then I felt her fingers brush lightly against my back. I went still. Stella's voice came soft in the darkness. If we're going to sell this, you can't freeze every time I touch you. I turned my head slightly toward her. I'm not freezing because you're touching me. I'm freezing because it doesn't feel fake anymore. The words hung between us. Stella didn't pull her hand away. It stayed there, warm against my shirt, as snow continued to fall quietly outside the window. Neither of us said anything else. But we both knew the weekend had already changed. The next morning, the honeymoon suite felt smaller than it had the night before. Not because anything had happened, but because too much had already been said in the dark. Stella stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair while I tied my boots too tightly, just to give my hands something to do. When our eyes met in the reflection, she raised an eyebrow. What? She asked. Nothing, I said too quickly. She smirked. Very convincing. I'm practicing my fake boyfriend face for your family. Stella laughed, but the sound was quieter than usual. Neither of us had slept much. The weight of last night's conversation still hung in the room like smoke. Down at the main house, breakfast was pure chaos. Kids running around, Tyler arguing with his mom about coffee strength, and someone burning another batch of pancakes. Richard sat at the head of the table wearing a ridiculous paper birthday crown the kids had forced on him. He looked both annoyed and secretly pleased. When Stella and I walked in, she slipped her arm through mine again. This time, it didn't feel like acting, it felt like instinct. Brandon was already there, standing near the coffee station in a perfectly pressed sweater talking to Tyler. When he saw us, his polite mask stayed in place, but his eyes lingered on Stella's hand on my arm a second too long. Breakfast passed in a blur of laughter and family stories. I played my role well, remembering how Stella liked her eggs, stealing glances at her that weren't entirely fake. Under the table, our knees brushed. Neither of us pulled away, but Brandon was watching. Always watching. Later that afternoon, the family gathered outside by the lake for photos. The snow had stopped, leaving everything covered in a clean, white blanket. The dark water stretched out behind us like glass. Richard stood in the middle, smiling for the camera while the rest of us arranged ourselves around him. I felt Brandon approaching before I saw him. He walked up beside Stella, voice smooth and casual. "You look good, Moll. Happy." Stella stiffened. I moved closer, my hand finding the small of her back. "Thanks," she said politely, not looking at him. Brandon smiled, that reasonable smile of his. "It's nice to see you smiling again. Real smiles, I mean." The words were harmless on the surface, but I caught the knife underneath. He was reminding her of all the times she'd pretended to be okay when they were together. Stella's breathing changed. I felt it against my side. I didn't think. I just acted. I turned her toward me, cupped her face with both hands, and kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone, in front of Brandon. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was months, maybe years, of everything we'd never said poured into one moment. Stella froze for half a second, then kissed me back like she'd been waiting for permission. Her hands gripped my jacket, pulling me closer. The cold air disappeared. The sound of the family faded. There was only her mouth on mine, warm and real and desperate. When we finally broke apart, our breaths clouded between us in the cold. The entire family had gone silent. Tyler whistled. "About damn time!" Aunt Carol clapped. Richard let out a deep chuckle and shook his head like he'd known all along. Brandon stood frozen near the edge of the group. His face stayed calm, but his eyes were dark. He turned and walked back toward the house without another word. Stella pressed her forehead against my chest for a moment, hiding her face. I wrapped my arms around her, one hand resting on the back of her head. For the first time all weekend, I wasn't pretending. After the photos, Stella pulled me away from the group, down toward the old boathouse by the water. The small wooden building smelled like damp rope and lake water. A canoe hung on the wall. She closed the door behind us, shutting out the noise of her family. She turned to face me, breathing fast. "That wasn't fake," she said. "No," I replied. "It wasn't." Stella looked at me, her eyes searching. "You kissed me because I said I might need you to?" "You didn't say it yet." "You knew what I meant." I stepped closer. "I kissed you because I couldn't stand watching you force that smile anymore. Because I hate the way he talks to you. But mostly because I've wanted to kiss you for longer than I'm ready to admit." The words hung between us. Stella's eyes softened, but there was fear there too. "I chose you for this weekend because you make me feel safe," she whispered. "Not just because of Brandon. Because with you, I don't have to pretend I'm okay when I'm not." I reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Stella, this stopped feeling fake a long time ago for me." She closed her eyes for a second, then opened them again. "I know," she said softly. "That's what scares me." We stood there in the dim boathouse, the cold lake wind whispering against the walls. No more jokes. No more hiding behind years of friendship. The line had been crossed, and neither of us wanted to go back. The rest of the afternoon passed in a warm blur. After the kiss by the lake, everything felt different. The family treated us like we were finally official, teasing us gently instead of watching with careful pity. Tyler kept making jokes about how long it took us to figure it out. Aunt Carol cried, happy tears twice. Even Richard gave me a long, knowing look when we walked back inside, his hand resting heavily on my shoulder for a moment like a silent approval. But Brandon left early. He made some excuse about work and drove away before dinner. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt relieved that Stella wouldn't have to spend the rest of the night pretending she was okay. Dinner that evening was quieter than the night before. The big table was still full, but the energy had softened. Plates of leftover roast, warm bread, and too much pie. The fireplace crackled in the corner, throwing golden light across the room. Stella sat beside me, her knee pressed against mine under the table. This time, neither of us pulled away. After dessert, Richard stood up slowly, holding a glass of sparkling cider. The room grew quiet. He wasn't one for long speeches, but tonight he looked like he had something important to say. 60 years, he started, his voice low and rough. Doesn't feel that long when I look around this table, but it's long enough to know one thing for sure. He paused, eyes moving across all of us. We waste too much time waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting until we're less scared, less proud, less stubborn. Waiting until it feels safe to say what we should have said years ago. Stella's hand found mine under the table and held on tight. Richard's gaze settled on his daughter, then drifted to me. Life doesn't always give us clean, perfect chances, he continued. Sometimes it gives us a crowded house, bad weather, burnt bread, and the people we love standing right in front of us, while we're still pretending we don't see them. A soft laugh rippled through the table, but Stella didn't laugh. She was staring down at her plate, her fingers trembling slightly in mine. Richard raised his glass. So my birthday wish is simple. If you love someone, be brave enough while you still have the chance. Don't make the rest of us watch you waste another 10 years pretending. Tyler nearly choked on his drink. Richard just smiled calmly. The table erupted in warm laughter and clinking glasses. But I couldn't laugh. Richard's words had landed too close to the truth. After dinner, the house slowly settled. Kids fell asleep on the couches. Adults drank coffee in the kitchen. Stella and I slipped out to the back porch for air. Snow had started falling again, soft and silent. The lake was a black mirror beyond the trees. A single porch light cast a warm glow over the wooden steps. We sat on the old bench, shoulders touching. The cold air felt good after the crowded house. Stella spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Dad's speech tonight? Yeah, I said. He wasn't being subtle. She let out a shaky breath. I've been pretending for so long, Tyler. Pretending I was fine after Brandon. Pretending I didn't need anyone. Pretending that what I feel when I'm with you is still just friendship. I turned to look at her. Snowflakes caught in her hair like tiny stars. I stopped pretending a while ago, I said quietly. Maybe years ago. I just didn't want to lose you by saying it out loud. Stella looked at me, eyes shining in the dim light. I chose you for this weekend because you've always been my safe place, she whispered. But it's more than that. You make me want things again. You make me believe I can be happy without having to prove anything. My chest felt tight. I reached out and brushed a snowflake from her cheek. I love you, Stella, I said. The words came out steady, even though my heart was racing. Not as a friend, not as a fake boyfriend. I love you. I've loved you for longer than I can remember. And I'm tired of pretending I don't. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she leaned in, pressing her forehead against mine. I love you too, she breathed. I think I've been in love with you for years and was too scared to admit it. I didn't want to ruin what we had. You couldn't ruin it, I said. We were always meant to end up here. We kissed on the porch, slow and deep, with snow falling softly around us. There was no audience this time, no Brandon watching, no family cheering, just us. When we pulled apart, Stella smiled. A real smile, soft and tired and beautiful. So, you're fired as my fake boyfriend. I laughed quietly. Good, I didn't want the job anymore anyway. She rested her head on my shoulder. We sat there for a long time, wrapped in the quiet of the falling snow, the warmth of finally telling the truth. That night, back in the honeymoon suite, we didn't sleep on opposite sides of the bed. Stella curled into me, her head on my chest, my arm around her. For For the first time all weekend, the room felt exactly right. No more pretending. A few months later, we returned to the lake house for Easter. This time there was no fake story, no careful distance, no excuse about why we needed to share a room. Stella walked into the house with her fingers laced through mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. Aunt Carol took one look at us and simply said, "Finally, I was getting tired." Tyler still tried to take credit. "At least admit I helped by inviting Brandon," he said with a grin. Stella pointed at him without hesitation. "You're still at negative credit." Richard sat at the head of the table as usual, watching us with quiet satisfaction. When Stella reached over and stole fries from my plate without asking, he looked at me and said dryly, "Don't complain, Tyler. You're the last one to catch up. Be grateful." Stella laughed so hard she nearly choked. I just smiled and let her take whatever she wanted. Watching her laugh like that, unguarded, bright, no mask, was still my favorite thing in the world. The transition wasn't magically easy. We had been best friends for 17 years. Turning that into something more came with its own complications. There were nights Stella got scared that if we didn't work out, she would lose the one person who had always been her safe place. She told me that once while we were sitting in my truck after a long day. I didn't brush it off. "I'm scared too," I said, holding her hand on the gear shift. "But I'm more scared of going back to pretending you're just my friend." That became our first real rule. No more hiding behind jokes when things got heavy. We still laughed constantly. She still teased me for being a 30-year-old electrician who once spent 20 minutes trying to install a simple light fixture because I wanted it to look cool. I still made fun of her for turning every grocery run into a sociological study of the people in line. But when something hurt, we talked about it now. No running, no deflecting. One evening, Richard pulled me aside on the porch while Stella was inside helping her mom. He handed me a beer and looked out at the lake for a long moment. "I know my daughter is strong," he said finally, "but strong doesn't mean she doesn't need someone." "I know, sir." He turned to look at me. "Brandon made her feel like needing someone made her weak. I don't ever want to see her go back to that." I met his eyes. I don't want Stella to make herself smaller to fit me. I love her exactly the way she is. Richard studied me for a long time. Then he nodded once. "Good." That was the closest thing to a blessing I was going to get. And it was enough. Later that night, Stella and I sat on the same porch where we had confessed months earlier. The snow was gone now. Summer air moved softly through the trees. She was eating fries from my plate again, legs tucked under her on the bench. I watched her for a moment, then said quietly, "I was thinking about that first weekend." She looked up, smiling softly. "The honeymoon suite?" "Yeah, and how scared we both were. How long we waited." Stella set the fries down and turned toward me. "We wasted a lot of time," she said. "We did, but we're not wasting this part." She leaned in and kissed me, slow, warm, and sure. No audience, no Brandon, no fear of what came next. Just us. Love wasn't something that suddenly appeared that snowy weekend. It had been there for years. Sitting on couches, sharing takeout, driving through bad weather, laughing through hard days. We just finally stopped pretending it was something else. Sometimes the best things in life aren't dramatic. They're quiet. They're patient. They wait for you to be brave enough to stop running from them. I'm glad we finally stopped running.